I can't read English well, so I trusted my accountant daughter with my finances. She had me signing papers to transfer my business to her while telling me they were just standard tax forms. She thought my ignorance of the law made me weak. She didn't understand that for 30 years I hadn't been building a business. I had been building a community. And my community was about to teach her the difference between a legal document and real power. Before we begin, I want to thank you for being here with me, for giving your time to an old woman and her story. If you believe that a neighborhood is a family, that our elders are the roots that hold us steady, and that a lifetime of kindness is a fortress that can never be breached, then you are in the right place. It fills my heart to see you all here, so please, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now let me tell you how my own daughter tried to steal my life's work and how my neighborhood rose up to become my army. My name is Dorothy Henderson, and for 32 years, my world has smelled of clean linen and hot steam. I am the owner of Dot Suds and Folds, a small chain of 3 laundromats that have served the heart of Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn since my late husband Charles and I first bought the flagship location on Tompkins Avenue. At 71, I am a widow, a mother, a grandmother, and a neighborhood institution. My business is not just a place to wash clothes. It is a community center. It's where young mothers meet, where old men play checkers while their clothes tumble dry, where a family short on cash can run a tab until payday, no questions asked. My business is built on trust, on the currency of goodwill that flows through the veins of this neighborhood. My daughter, Crystal, lives in a different world. At 45, she is a certified public accountant, a CPA. She lives in a big house in a manicured New Jersey suburb with her husband and 2 children. She is polished, ambitious, and I have come to realize, deeply ashamed of her simple Bed-Stuy roots. To her, my laundromats are not a community legacy. They are an unglamorous, cash-heavy business she finds vaguely embarrassing. My vulnerability, the chink in my armor, has always been the written word. I came to this country from Jamaica as a young woman. I can speak the language of business, of people, of the heart. But the dense, tangled language of legal documents, of tax forms, of contracts, that has always been a foreign tongue to me. For years, Charles handled the paperwork. After he passed, I leaned on Crystal, my daughter, the accountant. I was so proud of her education and her professional success. I trusted her completely. It was a trust she would use as a weapon. The campaign began subtly. It was tax season, and Crystal started bringing stacks of paperwork to my brownstone on her weekly visits. "Mama," she'd say, her voice full of a brisk, professional efficiency, "we have to get these annual filings done for the city. New regulations. It's all very complicated." She would spread the papers across my kitchen table, a sea of fine print and intimidating legal jargon. She would point to various signature lines with her long, manicured finger. "This is just the quarterly tax statement. This one is the business license renewal. This is for the new insurance policy. Standard procedure." I would look at the pages, the words blurring into a meaningless jumble. I would see phrases like heretofore, indemnification, subsidiary. It was a language designed to confuse, to intimidate. I would look up at my daughter, my educated, successful daughter, and I would feel a surge of gratitude. She was protecting me from this world I didn't understand. "Thank you, baby," I would say. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "I know, Mama," she would reply, a faint, unreadable smile on her lips. "Just sign here." And I would sign. I signed everything she put in front of me. I signed with the same pen my husband had used to sign the original deed to our first laundromat. I signed with a heart full of a mother's foolish, unconditional trust. This became our new ritual. Every few weeks there would be more papers. New city compliance forms, Mama. Updated vendor agreements. Liability waivers. Each time, her explanations were smooth, plausible, and delivered with an air of slight impatience, as if I were a slow client holding up her very important day. The trust she was building was not the warm trust of a loving daughter, but the cold, procedural trust one places in a professional. He was my accountant, my expert. And I, her loving, trusting mother, was her mark. I didn't notice the changes at first. I didn't notice the name of the LLC on one document being slightly different from the last. I didn't notice the subtle shift in language from owner to primary shareholder. I was too busy running my business, talking to my customers, being the Dorothy Henderson my neighborhood knew and loved. I was focused on the lifeblood of my business, the people, I had no idea that my own daughter was quietly, methodically cutting the veins. She was a master of her craft. The deception was a work of art in its own cold, cruel way. She was using her professional knowledge, the very education I had worked so hard to help provide for her, as a tool to dispossess me. She was building a legal cage around me, bar by bar, signature by signature. And I, the trusting mother who couldn't read the fine print, was willingly, gratefully helping her to lock the door. The final act of Crystal's betrayal was executed on a cold, rainy Tuesday in March. She arrived at my house in the late afternoon, her expensive trench coat damp, her demeanor one of extreme urgency. She was carrying a document that was thicker than any she had brought before, bound in a stiff blue legal cover. "Mama, thank God you're here," she said, her voice a breathless rush. "I have to get this filed by 5 o'clock. It's the new master business license renewal for the state. They changed everything this year. It's a nightmare." She spread the document across my kitchen table. It was heavy, intimidating, at least 50 pages long. The front page was a dense block of text with a title that meant nothing to me: Articles of Consolidation and Transfer. "I don't have time to walk you through the whole thing, Mama," she said, flipping through the pages rapidly. "It's just a bunch of legal boilerplate. The important part is at the back. We have to get this notarized and couriered downtown before the state office closes." For the first time in this long process, a small, cold flicker of unease stirred in my gut. It was the thickness of the document, the frantic urgency in her voice, the way she avoided my eyes. Felt different. "Crystal, what is this really?" I asked, placing my hand on the document to stop her from flipping the pages. "It feels heavy." Her face tightened for a split second, a flash of pure, cold fury that she quickly masked with a look of exasperated patience. "Mama, please," she sighed, her voice dripping with condescension. "Do you know what a holding company is? Do you understand state tax law and liability shields? Of course you don't. That's my job. I am trying to protect you. I am trying to protect the business from lawsuits and taxes. This is what you pay me for." Except I didn't pay her. She did this out of love, she always said. Her words were a perfect, calculated strike. They were designed to make me feel foolish, ignorant, and ungrateful. And they worked. I felt a hot flush of shame. Who was I, a simple laundromat owner, to question my daughter, the CPA? She was the expert. I was the old woman who didn't understand. "I'm sorry, baby," I said, pulling my hand back as if I had been burned. "You're right. I worry." "There's nothing to worry about," she said, her voice softening now that she had me back on the hook. "I've got it all under control. I just need you to sign. Here, here, and here." She pointed to 3 signature lines on the final page, each marked with a small yellow "Sign Here" sticker. I looked at the page. It was filled with words I didn't recognize. Assignor. Assignee. Irrevocable transfer. "What does irrevocable mean?" asked my voice small. "It just means it's final for this tax year, Mama," she said smoothly, the lie so effortless it was breathtaking. "Now please. The courier is waiting." I looked up at my daughter. I saw the expensive suit, the confident posture, the look of cool competence in her eyes. I saw the successful woman I had always dreamed she would be. And in that moment, my pride in her, my love for her, my deep, abiding trust in her, overrode the small, flickering warning light in my soul. I pushed the feeling down. I told myself I was being a silly, suspicious old woman. This was my Crystal. My baby. He would never hurt me. I picked up the pen. I took a deep breath. And I signed my name. I signed away my business. I signed away my life's work. I signed away the legacy my husband and I had built with 30 years of sweat and sacrifice. I signed my own eviction notice. Crystal's relief was a visible thing. The tension in her shoulders relaxed. She quickly gathered the pages, her movements brisk and efficient. She didn't look at the signature. She didn't need to. She had what she came for. She placed the document in her expensive leather briefcase and snapped it shut. The sound echoed in the quiet kitchen like a jail cell door slamming shut. "Thank you, Mama," she said, planting a quick, cold kiss on my cheek. "You won't have to worry about any of this paperwork ever again. I'll take care of everything from now on." She turned and walked out the door, leaving me alone in my kitchen. The rain was beating against the window panes. I felt a sudden, profound chill, a sense of loss so deep and so vague I couldn't give it a name. I had just signed a document that I didn't understand. But I had trusted my daughter. And I believed with all my heart that everything would be all right. I had never been more wrong in my life. The change came not like a slow tide but like a guillotine. Swift, brutal, and final. A week after I signed the last document, I went to make my usual Tuesday morning visit to the flagship laundromat on Tompkins Avenue. It was my favorite part of the week. It was where I would chat with my manager, Maria, a woman who had started with me as a teenager and had been with me for 22 years. It was where I would greet my customers by name, ask about their children, and listen to the stories of the neighborhood. When I walked in, the place felt different. The usual warm, chaotic energy was gone, replaced by a cold, sterile silence. Maria was not behind the counter. In her place was a thin, severe-looking man in a cheap suit. He didn't smile when I came in. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice flat, impersonal. "I'm Dorothy Henderson," I said, confused. "I'm the owner. Where is Maria?" The man looked at a clipboard, then back at me, his expression unchanging. "Maria Garcia is no longer employed by this company," he said. "Her services were terminated yesterday. As were the services of the other location managers, Sharon and Denise." The words hit me like a physical blow. Maria, Sharon, and Denise. My girls. They were more than employees, they were family. Terminated? By who? On whose authority? I demanded, my voice rising. "On the authority of the new owner," the man said, his voice full of a bored indifference. He gestured to the wall behind him where the framed business license had always hung. The old license with my name on it was gone. In its place was a new one. I stepped closer, my heart pounding. The owner was listed as Henderson Holdings, LLC. The principal agent was listed as Crystal Henderson. I stared at the name. My daughter's name. It didn't make sense. This had to be a mistake, some kind of legal formality I didn't understand. "There must be a misunderstanding," I said, my voice shaking. "I am the owner. This is my business." "According to the documents on file, you are not," the man said, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Now, unless you are here to do your laundry, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This is private property." Private property. My property. I was being told to leave my own business by a stranger. I stumbled out onto the street, the sounds of Bed-Stuy fading into a dull roar in my ears. I was in shock, my mind refusing to accept what had just happened. My first thought was that there was a problem with the bank. I rushed home and tried to log into the business bank account online, something Crystal had set up for me but which I rarely used. A red error message flashed on the screen. "Access denied." Panic, cold and sharp, began to set in. I called the business banking hotline. After 20 minutes on hold, a polite young man informed me that my name had been removed as a signatory from all accounts associated with Suds and Folds 3 days ago. The sole signatory was now Crystal Henderson. The final, undeniable proof came when I tried to call my office, the small room at the back of the Tompkins location where I kept my records. A man I didn't know answered the phone. When I told him who I was, he informed me in a cold, professional voice that the locks had been changed and that I was not to come to the premises again. I was locked out. Completely and utterly locked out of my own life. The pieces of the puzzle, the weeks of paperwork, the rushed final signature, the articles of consolidation and transfer, all slammed into place with a horrifying, sickening clarity. She had not been protecting me. She had been robbing me. The standard tax forms were a lie. The license renewals were a lie. It had all been a lie. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, my educated, successful daughter, had used her knowledge, her position, and my trust to systematically, methodically, and legally steal my entire life's work from under my nose. I sank into a chair in my living room, the phone still in my hand. The house was silent. The trust one had placed in my child, a trust that had been the bedrock of my world, had been utterly betrayed. It was a betrayal so profound, so absolute that it felt like a death. In a way it was. The Dorothy Henderson who had woken up that morning, the proud, trusting mother, was gone forever. In her place was a woman who had been tricked, dispossessed, and made a fool of. I was 71 years old, and I had just been rendered a powerless stranger in my own life. The grief was a physical weight so heavy I thought it might crush me. I had never felt more alone. The hours after the realization were a gray, formless fog of shock and grief. I sat in my living room, the silence of the house a testament to my sudden, profound isolation. My business was gone. My employees were gone. My trust in my own child was a pile of ashes. I felt a fool, an old, stupid woman who had been easily tricked. The shame was a bitter, metallic taste in my mouth. The doorbell rang in the late afternoon, startling me. I opened it to find Maria, Sharon, and Denise standing on my stoop, their faces etched with a mixture of anger, confusion, and deep, sorrowful loyalty. They were my girls, the women who had helped me build my business, and they had come to me, their fired boss, for answers. Seeing their faces, their pain broke through my own fog of despair. Maria, who had started with me when she was just a girl of 19, was weeping openly. "Mrs. Henderson," she cried, "what is happening? This man, he came in and just told us we were finished. 30 years I have worked for you. He said your daughter is the new owner." Their story confirmed my worst fears. It was real. It had all been real. I invited them in, and we sat in my living room for women united in our disbelief and heartbreak. I told them what I knew, my voice trembling as I recounted the weeks of paperwork, the final, rushed signature. I confessed my own foolishness, my own blind trust. They didn't see me as a fool. They saw me as a victim. Their anger was not directed at me, but at Crystal. Their loyalty, even after being so cruelly dismissed, was a balm to my wounded soul. But it offered no solution. When they left, I was alone again with my powerlessness. I knew I couldn't face this alone. There was only one person in the world I trusted enough to show the full extent of my own folly. I picked up the phone and called George Bishop. Mr. George was my late husband's best friend, a man who had been a constant, steady presence in my life for over 50 years. He was a retired MTA union representative, a man whose life had been spent fighting for the little guy, a man who could smell a scam from a mile away. He was 74 years old, sharp as a tack and fiercely, uncompromisingly loyal. "Dorothy?" he answered, his voice a familiar, comforting rumble. "What's wrong? You sound terrible." "George," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I need you. I think I'm in terrible trouble." He was at my house in under an hour, his face a mask of grim concern. I sat him down at my kitchen table, the same table where Crystal had presented her lies, and I told him everything. I held nothing back. I told him about the stacks of papers, my inability to read them, my blind faith in my daughter. I confessed my shame, my fear, my utter helplessness. He listened patiently, his dark eyes never leaving my face. He didn't interrupt. He just let me pour out the whole sorry story. When I was finished, I pushed the one document I had managed to keep a copy of across the table, one of the earlier, simpler forms Crystal had left behind. Mr. George put on his reading glasses and studied the paper. He read it once, then twice. He was a man who had spent a lifetime deciphering contracts, fighting loopholes, and protecting his union members from predatory clauses. He knew the language of the law, the language that had been used to trick me. When he finally looked up, his face was like stone. The usual warmth in his eyes had been replaced by a cold, hard fury. "Dut," he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "This isn't a tax form. This is a shareholder resolution. It gives the primary agent of the LLC the power to act without the consent of the other board members. She was systematically stripping you of your power, piece by piece." He looked at me, his eyes full of a deep, sorrowful anger. "She didn't just trick you. She planned this. This was a long con. Methodical. Vicious." Hearing him confirm it, hearing him name the evil for what it was both devastating and, in a strange way, liberating. I wasn't just a foolish old woman. I had been the victim of a calculated, professional betrayal. "But what can I do, George?" I cried, the tears finally coming hot and fast. "She has the papers. She has the law on her side. I signed everything. I have nothing." Mr. George stood up and began to pace my small kitchen, his energy filling the room like a gathering storm. "No," he said, his voice ringing with a power I hadn't heard in years. "No, you are wrong. You have everything. He has the paper. You have the people. He has the signature. You have the name. She thinks she stole a business. She has no idea what a business is." He stopped pacing and looked at me, his eyes burning with a righteous fire. "She may have your signature. He said, his voice dropping to a low, determined growl. "But she doesn't have your name. In this neighborhood, your name, Dorothy Henderson, is worth more than any legal document she can ever forge. And we are about to teach that girl the difference. He picked up his phone. I'm calling Pastor John, he said. It's time for the neighborhood to go to war. In that moment, a flicker of hope, a feeling I thought had been extinguished forever, ignited in my chest. I was not alone. I had an ally. And my quiet, gentle friend George Bishop had just become the general of my army. George Bishop was a man who understood power. Not the power of money or legal documents, but the real, grassroots power of a united community. He knew that in a place like Bed-Stuy, reputation is currency, and loyalty is a bond stronger than any contract. His first and only call was to Reverend John Abernathy, the pastor of the church where I had been a faithful member for 40 years, the church where my husband's funeral had been held, the church that was the spiritual heart of our community. The meeting took place that very evening in the pastor's office, a room filled with books and the scent of old paper. It was me, George, and Reverend John. The pastor was a tall, thoughtful man with a booming voice that could shake the rafters on Sunday morning, but a spirit as gentle as a dove. I told my story again, but this time with George by my side, my voice was steadier. As Reverend John listened, his gentle expression hardened into one of profound, righteous indignation. He had known me for decades. He had baptized my grandchildren. He had watched me build my business with honesty and grace. This, he said when I had finished, his voice a low, dangerous rumble, is a sin that cries out to heaven. This is the wolf in sheep's clothing that the scriptures warn us of. And she is preying upon her own mother. We will not allow it. The law is on her side, Reverend, I said, my voice still full of doubt. I signed the papers. The law of man is one thing, Sister Dorothy, he replied, his eyes flashing with fire. But there is a higher law. The law of community. The law of decency. And we will enforce that law. George leaned forward, his hands clasped on the pastor's desk. Here's the plan, he said. Crystal thinks she bought a business. What she bought is a name. And we're about to make that name toxic for her. We're not going to be loud. We're not going to be violent. We're going to be quiet. We're going to be dignified. And we are going to be relentless. The uprising began that Sunday. Reverend John did not mention my name from the pulpit. He did not mention Crystal's name. He didn't have to. He delivered a sermon on the fifth commandment, honor thy father and thy mother. He spoke of the sacred trust between a child and a parent. He spoke of the serpent of greed that can poison a family. He spoke of a beloved elder in their own congregation who had been tricked and dispossessed by her own flesh and blood. He spoke of the duty of the community to stand as a shield for its vulnerable members. The congregation sat in stunned, electric silence. Every single person in that church knew exactly who he was talking about. After the service, the fellowship hall was buzzing not with gossip, but with a quiet, determined anger. People came up to me not with pity but with pledges of support. We're with you, Miss Dorothy, they said one after another. You just tell us what you need. What they did next was a thing of beauty, a perfectly orchestrated campaign of peaceful, powerful, nonviolent resistance. It started on Monday morning. The three managers I had been forced to fire, Maria, Sharon, and Denise, became the generals of the ground campaign. They stood on the sidewalk outside each of the three laundromat locations. They didn't yell. They didn't hold signs. They just stood there, their presence a silent, powerful testament. When a customer, a neighbor they had known for years, would approach, they would speak to them quietly. Good morning, Mrs. Jones, Maria would say. I'm so sorry, but we can't help you today. Miss Dorothy was forced out of her own business by her daughter. We were all fired. We can't, in good conscience, let you support what's happened. The customers would stop, their laundry baskets in their hands. They would listen, their faces hardening with disbelief and anger. And then one by one they would turn around and walk away. By Tuesday the flyers appeared. They were simple, printed at the church, and they appeared on every lamppost, in every barbershop window, on every community bulletin board in the neighborhood. They showed a smiling picture of me from a church picnic. Above the picture the headline read, "This is Dorothy's house." Below it, the text was simple. Suds and Folds was built on 30 years of love and trust. The new management has betrayed that trust. Please support Miss Dorothy by taking your business elsewhere. Don't feed the vulture. The effect was immediate and devastating. My laundromats, usually bustling hubs of activity, became ghost towns. The new corporate manager Crystal had hired would stand inside, staring out at the empty machines and the silent, dignified picket line of my former employees. The community took care of its own. The other, smaller laundromats in the area were suddenly overwhelmed with business. Their owners, friends of mine for years, would call me. One said, "I've got your customers here. They're telling me the story. Don't you worry. We're taking care of them for you until you get your place back." Crystal's plan was failing in the most spectacular way possible. She had legally stolen the business, but she had failed to understand that the business was nothing without the community's blessing. The machines, the storefronts, the name, they were just an empty shell. The true value, the soul of the company, was my reputation, my goodwill. And that was an asset she could never own, an asset that was now being actively, powerfully wielded against her. She was the legal owner of 3 empty rooms full of silent washing machines. She had the paper, but I had the people. From her sterile office in New Jersey, Crystal was watching her multi-million-dollar payday evaporate into thin air. She was in the final stages of due diligence with National Wash Co., a massive commercial laundry corporation looking to expand its footprint in Brooklyn. The sale of Suds and Folds was supposed to be her masterpiece, the liquidation of her mother's unglamorous assets into a life-changing river of cash. The first sign of trouble came from the new manager she had hired. His daily reports were a litany of despair. Revenue down 80%, one read. Revenue down 95%, read the next. 0 customers today at the Tompkins location, read the third. He sent her blurry cell phone pictures of the flyers, of the silent, dignified women standing vigil outside. Crystal, in her arrogance, believed it was a temporary problem, a small, sentimental protest that would die down. She called the manager and told him to offer discounts and ignore the old ladies. But the people of Bed-Stuy could not be bought off with a coupon. Their loyalty was not for sale. The final, fatal blow came from the corporation itself. The due diligence team for National Wash Co. was not just looking at past profits. They were assessing future viability. They sent their own people, secret shoppers, to the locations. What they found was a business in a state of catastrophic collapse. They found empty stores, angry community members, and a brand that had become toxic overnight. They saw the flyers. They heard the stories. They presented their findings to their board. The report was damning. The business's primary asset, they concluded, was not its machinery or its locations, but the 30 years of goodwill built by its original owner, Dorothy Henderson. That asset was now gone. In fact, it had been turned into a massive liability that was actively working against the company. The call from the corporation's lawyer to Crystal was brief and brutal. Citing a clause in their letter of intent regarding material adverse change and reputational risk, National Wash Co. was officially withdrawing its multi-million-dollar offer. The deal was dead. Crystal's dream, the dream for which she had sacrificed her own mother, vanished in that single phone call. She was left as the sole legal owner of a worthless empire. She owned an LLC with 3 commercial leases, mounting utility bills, payroll for a manager with nothing to manage and 0 income. The business was not just failing, it was a financial black hole, sucking her deeper into debt with every passing day. The calls she made to me were a pathetic spectacle. The first was full of rage and threats. "You did this," she shrieked into the phone. "You turned them against me. I'll sue you. I'll sue them all." "You can't sue a community, Crystal," I replied, my voice calm, the fear completely gone. "And you have no one to blame but yourself." The second call a week later was one of desperate, pleading tears. She begged me to call it off, to tell the people to come back. "Please, Mama," she wept. "I'll give you the business back. Just make it stop." "It's not mine to stop, Crystal," I told her, the words tasting not of revenge but of a sad, final truth. "You broke the trust. I can't just stitch it back together for you." Within 2 months, Henderson Holdings LLC filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. The business I had spent my life building was to be liquidated, its assets sold off for pennies on the dollar to satisfy the creditors she had accrued. But my community had one final act of grace in store for me. Reverend John and Mr. George, my 2 generals, came to my house with a plan. They had gone to the church board, to local business owners, to the people. They had started a community fund. Everyone had chipped in, $10 here, $50 there. It was a war chest built of love. With Mr. George acting as our agent, our community fund went to the bankruptcy court auction. There were no other bidders. Who would want to buy a failed laundromat business in a neighborhood that had so fiercely rejected its new owner? For a fraction of its original worth, we bought it all back. The machines, the fixtures, the name. My name. We had a grand reopening a month later. Felt like a neighborhood holiday. The laundromats were filled with flowers, with balloons, with people. Reverend John said a blessing. Mr. George made a speech. And I, Dorothy Henderson, stood behind the counter of my store on Tompkins Avenue, my heart so full I thought it might burst. Maria, Sharon, and Denise were back at their rightful posts. My customers, my friends, my family were all there. Crystal was never seen in Bed-Stuy again. I heard she and her husband had to sell their big house in New Jersey. I do not know where they went. I do not waste my time thinking about it. My life is full again. My hands are busy not with worry but with work. My business is thriving, held up by the strong, loving arms of the community I nurtured, the community that, when the time came, nurtured me right back. My daughter thought my greatest vulnerability was my inability to read a legal contract. She was wrong. My greatest strength was the love I had given away freely for 30 years. And when the bill came due, it was a debt she could never hope to pay.